everyone's here for me, so thank you for coming out for me. I'm Allegra Frank from Vox.com and Polygon, and I am so happy to be here with two very exciting guests for, I think, what will be a really fun, interesting panel about a show we all know and love. But let me introduce them first, and then we'll get into it. So first, I'm going to bring up Darrick Bachman, writer, creative designer on Samurai Jack, the Samurai Jack video game. And then our second and final guest, very short intro here. Our second and final guest is Genndy Tartakovsky, the creator and director of Samurai Jack. All right.
Hello, Boston! Yeah! This is my first time speaking in Boston.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I am honored to be here running that show with you. And I'm sure everyone here is super excited to be party to that. So let's get into it. Thank you guys for both being here. I think we're gonna start with a little video, but to set it up really quickly, Samurai Jack has been a huge cult success, even bigger than cult. It's just been a major success, beloved by so many people. It started as a Cartoon Network show, came back in 2017 as an Adult Swim show for a final season, and now it is having its second ever video game. And we're going to show you an exclusive behind the scenes just to kind of intro you to the game. So maybe we can roll the video, and if you guys want to look at the screen.
My soul is as sharp as ever.
Turn the lights down.
My name is Phil Lamar, and I provide the voice of Samurai Jack. The Samurai Jack video game is not so much an extension of the story as much as an exploration. They've very cleverly figured out a way to add more adventure within the story that we already know about. Ashi is the focal point for Jack in the game because she represents hope. That's what she brings. That is what she symbolizes. Grab the hope. That is the way he is finally able to fulfill his life's ambition. And that is ultimately the only way to win the game. It's interesting because Genndy and Ryan and Darrick and all the guys, in a really cool way, were able to honor the stuff from the original episodes while creating a new story, a new world, and the game does that as well. It allows us to go even deeper and not only just see those elements that we remember from the original series, but to go in and explore and be in those worlds and fight villains that you remember.
You're so nice. Wow, listen to you. He's got to live in the city. Ha! It's still old.
You thought you could return to the past and destroy me?
But also the allies.
Jack, you're so close. You have to keep going.
He funds these people and connects with these people. Usually saves these people.
Aku, I must put an end to this madness.
And they honor him, and he depends on them. And ultimately, they come to his aid. And in the game, that's part of the world. That's part of being Samurai Jack. Is there are the villains and there are the allies. Sometimes you help them, and sometimes they help you.
It is good to see you too, oh, my friend.
The characters appeared in a few games in the past, but this is the only one that the real team has been fully involved in, and it's only been Falls to War. So for people who are fans of the show, this is a great game. When I think about what Samurai Jack means to me, it's something I'm so proud to be a part of. This character, this series, this game, this world. It's great to be able to play a hero who really embodies so much that we all should aspire towards. It's so nice to have somebody who's clear about his sword only works on evil people. Like, would that be nice to have? Aku, I will return to the past and destroy it once and for all.
Awesome. So, Samurai Jack, Battle Through Time. Super exciting. It looks awesome. And I think one of the really cool parts of it, as Phil Lamar mentioned in the video, is that it really draws on the lore and the story of the series itself. Darrick, maybe you can tell us a little bit about where in the series this game takes place. Where are we when we start up the game?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So we pick up in the series finale, the climax. Ashi realizes that she has Aku's power within her, and she rips open a portal in time. She's traveling back with Jack to destroy Aku, and he knows that his time is done. So he launches one last desperate Hail Mary while they're in the time tunnel and knocks Jack into a pocket of time where he's trapped. And so that's where this game takes place. Jack is trapped in between time, where he basically has to face everything that he's ever encountered in this world of the future. And Aku is basically like the puppet master who is taking him through this and trying to keep him trapped.
And it's great because it's everything you watched, you can now play all over again. So it's pretty cool from a fan point of view.
Yeah.
Like I would play it.
I hope so. So yeah, I mean, that's something that's really interesting about video games based on TV shows is that we are so aware of the story and we're used to watching it in more of a linear way, especially with Samurai Jack, where there is this cohesive narrative. How do we translate this linear narrative that we watch to an interactive space? How did you guys translate us just watching Jack to becoming Jack?
Well, I think we approached the story as like doing another episode of the series. So it was written as like, here's another episode, and trying to find a way to utilize the video game mechanics, but also take advantage of the fact that Jack doesn't know anything about this world. He doesn't know where he is. He just kind of wakes up. Did he get somewhere with Ashi? He doesn't know he's trapped in this place. And suddenly all these things that were familiar, that were friends, start coming at him, and everything that he thinks he knows isn't what it seems. So it's a big journey. And then there's also a great character arc where he's trying to find his way and kind of like losing hope again,
And I think it's kind of like a thing with Jack. It always kind of reminded me, like when I was a kid, I would go see Bruce Lee movies. And then you would come out of the movie theater and you would want to fight your friends and imitate what you just watched, because Bruce Lee was so inspiring. And I feel like sometimes, like when my son was real little, he would watch Samurai Jack sometimes, and we'd have to make him a sword, and then he'd walk around and fight and stuff. And I think this is the great thing of utilizing this kind of play, and now you could have the sword and you can actually control it and play out all the adventures that he had as yourself.
Yeah, and as a fan and somebody who's worked on the series the whole time, it's like when we went to the Japanese studio to Soleil and I actually got to see like the 3D models of the actual like villains from the series. It was incredible to me. It's like the fact that Jack's actually playing them, and it was pretty mind-blowing.
Right. I mean, as you said, as fans, but also the creators of the series, the creative team behind it, what were the core parts of the show that you wanted to make sure, okay, these need to be in the game and we need these to be as close to the original show as possible? When you're approaching this video game, obviously some things are going to change because it's a video game and not a TV show, but what parts of the spirit of Samurai Jack would you say remain in this game from the show?
I say the emotional angle of him as a character and remaining on his original quest. Approaching everything emotionally is kind of a big element of the series because he has been on this epic quest, and there's such a great relationship between him and Aku So it's like rekindling all of his friendships, and then the great rivalry that he has, and so it's just kind of approaching the story and making sure that the care to the actual character depth is there.
Yeah, and I think we could also, it's great that you could pick out, now that Jack has been, for over 15 years, has been on the air, you can pick out what has surfaced as kind of the favorites, villains.
Right.
Yeah.
The Demongo, of course, and and having the Scotsman come back, like all the characters that we feel really touched something with people, you can bring them back and have more adventures with them.
Definitely. And another thing about Samurai Jack, other than the iconic characters, is the style of it, the actual artistic style. It has this really unique look to it of silhouettes, of these really bright, beautiful backgrounds. How did you guys preserve that part of the game? I know the developers worked very hard on that, but for you, what was it like seeing the style of animation become the game?
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Because for Jack's world, everything is designed because he's so flat, and so we designed every shot and the way he moves, and it's not really built. And in video game world, everything is pretty much 360 degrees, right? You can put the camera wherever you want, and Jack is certainly not built from that because he does not look good from every angle. We have to really design it to the camera. And so I was really worried about, because this has happened once before, and the game was done very economically, the original game, very quickly, and it wasn't the love that you always want for one of your babies, really. Yeah. And I think with this game, we talked about initially the issues that we can have, and they really stayed true to the color palette, and even Scott Wills, who's the production designer, we would show Scott some of the scenes, and he was like, wow, it's so weird to see it come alive in this three-dimensional world. And so it was trying to keep, it's never going to be exactly the same because it's a different camera, different tools, and so we just want the aesthetic and the feeling, the feeling you want it to be very similar.
And the team at Soleil, they're huge fans of the series, so they work tirelessly to translate it, and I think it's really amazing. And when we saw the backgrounds at the studio, I was just floored by it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it does look really beautiful, especially in those cutscenes. Those were just so cartoony, but also similar, like familiar to the actual show. How did you feel when you saw the game in action, especially the cutscenes? Were you just floored by like, oh, this is our show?
Yeah, I think there's one in particular level that when I saw it, I was just like, because you see it on the show and it's very flat, and then when you actually see it in the game, you're like, I couldn't believe that just the use of space and being able to see how it works. I just thought it was incredible.
I think for me, like watching it develop and seeing the different stages, and when you first watch it, it's very crude and rougher, and you're like, oh, is that really how it's going to be? And then you kind of panic, but then you have faith in the process, and the next step you see more, and it's actually not just the stick, it's actually his sword that he's using and stuff. And for me, it's the color palette that I kind of mentioned that really started to come together. The animation was very true. And there's the thing, because it is a Japanese studio who was doing the animation, I always, being American, doing a style for samurai, which is kind of like their cowboys, their culture. I was always nervous about if somebody from Japan would watch Jack, if they're going to be like, this is completely incorrect. And I took time to really study how to hold a sword properly, how to do a proper slash, all this kind of read books about it. And then I remember actually while we were making the show, we had some visitors from a Japanese cable channel visiting Cartoon Network, and they wanted to see us. And then I was nervous, like they were going to yell at me. And they came up to my office and they said that we got it all right. And it was really comforting that we took the extra effort to get it there.
Yeah.
And you see that follow through in this video game
Totally,
for sure.
yeah.
So Genndy, you mentioned briefly that there was another video game, right? This is the second Jack video game. In 2004, there was a GameCube game. and it was a little bit less less good looking, we can say. And so that was 16 years ago. This is the first Samurai Jack video game
Yeah,
since
and this is the game that I always wanted back then.
Yeah.
Because you want to travel the worlds, you want to meet all the characters, and before it was just like some generic land, I think with one henchman or something. It was just very low rent, right? You just have a game engine, you throw it in, you change it a little bit, and it's done. And this one had the real voices. Everything is authentic to it, and it's got all the landscapes that we know and that we want to see. And it's a big adventure.
Yeah, it's a big idea, and
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's being able to look at it now and being able to go back and go through all the whole series and pull things out. It's kind of like, you know, you have this big library to choose all your favorites, but back then it was like the show was happening, so you couldn't really have that same depth, you know. And as a story, Jack's kind of meeting all these people that are from his past, so it's almost like he's traveling through his history and becoming familiar with everybody again too.
Yeah, I wanted to ask why now felt like the right time to approach Jack as a video game again versus then, and I think that speaks a lot to it, as, you know, there's more story now. But were you sort of reluctant after the not as great experience with the 2004 game?
I mean, yeah, I'm always skeptical and dubious about things, but I think stepping in after, you know, when Jack finished, like Jack did okay on air. It was, you know, it was a semi-successful show. It always was trying to find its audience because it was different at the time. And since it would stop airing, it got more and more popular. There was some figure, I remember talking to some of the DVD people back then when DVDs were still popular. They said that the same number of people buy Samurai Jack DVDs every month, right? And it was like a really weird statistic, and what that meant that the people that bought it told other people, and then they bought it, and they liked it, and they told other people. So there was this groundswell. And for the 15 years before we did the last season of Jack, it was everywhere that I spoke, everywhere that I went, there was this, when are you going to finish the story? Are you going to do a movie? Are you doing more episodes? It was a constant barrage and attack from you guys. That finally, when I got a free moment, I said, maybe it is time. Maybe now there's a brand new audience that's much bigger than what we ever had on air to do the last season. And I think that translates into a video game, how the popularity, there's something about Jack that stands the test of time. I mean, how many cartoons have gone and have came and gone through the years that you don't remember? And somehow something about Jack resonates.
Well, what about Jack do you think is what resonates? I'm going to push you back on that one.
Cool sword action.
Yeah.
No, I think it's the good versus bad. You know, the original pitch for Jack was a red background and then good versus evil, which was white and black. You know, in its purest form. And there's something about the purity of it. There's I think the elegance and the romance of the samurai culture that I always loved, that I think translates a little bit. The crazy scenarios that we put him in, and, you know, especially going through the relationship with Ashi and everything, and growing Jack as a character through that last season, I think was very impactful. And so, you know, but honestly, it's who knows.
I feel like these guys probably have
They have some ideas. Yeah.
What about for you, Darrick, as the person who, you know, had to helm the writing for this project? What do you think the driving force is for Jack that has made it something that so many people are still so committed to and in love with?
I think it's just because he's 100% just a hero. You can't shake his faith. He is, at his core, he has a belief and he has a purpose, and it's very difficult to break him out of that. And I think that people can, you know, look to him as something to aspire to, you know. And I think everybody wants a hero in their life, and
He's righteous.
He's righteous.
Yeah.
And I mean, you just referenced before talking about samurais being like the Japanese equivalent of the cowboy, the Western.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, there is this it's like very much the good versus evil, like just you can reduce it right down to that. And that's such a classic storyline, right? Just the basic, this person is good and that person is bad. and we want the good to win.
Yeah, and sometimes when you're doing storytelling, people have to understand what you're trying to do. So sometimes just understanding who's bad and who's good is challenging. And with this, it was always very clear, and it's always, I think a coup was always a big success of Jack because he is such a fun villain, and he's just pure evil. There's no motivation. He's just a bad guy, and there's something, and because we treated it more semi-comically, it kind of resonated in that kind of way to make him more unique. And sometimes as we say in the comic book world, you're always defined by your villain, right, to a degree. And this was the case with Jack too, that someone so righteous would then face somebody so evil.
Yeah, but totally also quirky too.
Yeah.
Like
That's what gives him so much depth. He has so many nuances, and he's neurotic, and he's super funny, and you can kind of push his buttons.
Yeah, and there's like making the show. I remember there's always we're always walking the line, and sometimes I think, okay, we've gone too far. Like we have an episode where Jack and Aku are gonna fight man on man, and then he's like, all right, I'll meet you by those ruins. And he's like, you know how to get there, right? And he's like, yes, I know. You take the 101 to the 405. He's like, I know. And just like moments like this that are very comedic to us, it builds Aku's character as this kind of quirky soul.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really special about the show too, is it does really strike that perfect balance of the traditional good versus evil action story, but also this really unique, weird sense of humor. Was that something that was really crucial for you guys to continue to strike that balance of in writing and creating the show?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's always hard because it started out as a pure kind of action show, and then I think because we did Dexter's and Powerpuff, it's hard to turn off the humor button.
Yeah.
And even doing Primal, right now, sometimes it takes such an effort to not try to be funny.
Yeah.
And sometimes it sneaks in, but it's part of the relevance, whatever. And in Jack, it was important, and we still had all the humor buttons from doing all the other shows, and it felt right. Like a lot of times, you figure out a show to a certain point, and then when you start making it, you have to let it evolve organically, and you kind of trust your instincts and your gut. Like, okay, this feels right. Whoa, this doesn't feel right. And sometimes you can't define it. And I've done that since the beginning, because especially in my younger days when doing Dexter, I was 25. I had no clue what was what, and I was just trying to get things done. And so you just trust your gut, and hopefully people will know that it's sincere and it's coming from the right place.
Right. I want to actually go back to Dexter, if we can go all the way back there. Thinking about how you went from Dexter's Lab, which is this really funny, pure comedic show, to Samurai Jack, which, as we said, does have this humor. It's not completely, dry. It does have a really great sense of humor, but it is also an action show. So to watch Dexter's Lab growing up and then see, the next thing from the Dexter's Lab guy is this action show? What? Is it going to be like Dexter fighting people? What elements of Dexter do you think you carried forward to Samurai Jack?
I mean, I think everything. It's funny because if you really watch Dexter, there was a lot of action. And we always did it in a comedic sense. And so there's like this action comedy where Jack was some comedy, but like a lot of times we did go in pure action and emotion. And so it was just a very natural extension of what we were already trying to do on Dexter, and just kind of growing with it. And then, Samurai came, I think I started doing it about halfway through Powerpuff. So I did about 2 seasons of Powerpuff, and then I started to develop Jack. And by the 4th season of Powerpuff, I was gone off the show. And so it was all very similar in our sensibility. And then I wanted to push Jack to whatever that next level was. But Dexter was the beginning for me, and it kind of, in a very quick way, defined all the things I wanted to do. And then if you look at Primal, you could probably see a lot of the same things, just more mature or more adult or more sophisticated, if I can use that word. And even when we were doing the last season of Jack, we were able to have so much more depth and more kind of emotional gravitas or whatever. So it's just made everything better.
Yeah. How much did the shift from Cartoon Network, which is where the majority of your shows before Primal and then the last season of Samurai Jack lived, how did that shift affect your ability to touch that sort of deeper nerve emotionally?
Going from Cartoon Network to Adult Swim?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot. I mean, you're basically, and the funny thing is, it's the same boss.
Yeah, it's the same channel, literally.
And it was Mike Lazo, who was one of the people who greenlit Dexter's Lab in the very early days, and then greenlit Samurai Jack. It was him and I at dinner. He's like, what do you want to do next? And I go, well, I got this idea. It's a samurai, super stylized, not a lot of talking, and kills robots. Sounds great. And then even through Primal. So the shift was very natural. It was just about addressing these more serious tones and having Jack have a really crazy emotional effect from all the years of fighting Aku.
Right.
Yeah, the emotional depth in the fifth season, we were able to tell a more adult story, but we never lost sight of the original series. Like, we always talk about how it's like, because that was aimed at a younger audience, and we didn't want to lose sight of that, because that's the core of the show. So still maintaining that nucleus, but being able to tell a bigger, more in-depth adult story.
Right. Yeah, I mean, making that change from family-friendly, afternoon hours to after dark, right? Like, the pool is closed, it's Adult Swim only, right? That was the whole Adult Swim pitch. That seems like it could be a hard move to make. We've seen other kids shows try making swings at being more adult friendly.
I think for us, like, we've approached everything, it's from a sincere point of view. I don't know what a 6-year-old likes or an 8-year-old likes when we were doing Dexter. It was just, if we can make everybody on the crew laugh, we've got something, as long as we're honest about it. And then doing Jack, like, this is what I like, this is what entertains me. And when we were doing the adult version of it, this seems important to us, this feels right for the character. And it is, the one interesting thing is, like, something that I haven't felt since Clone Wars, there was a pressure. And the preconceived notion, like, when you're doing Star Wars, okay, it's for the Star Wars audience, and they're gonna judge the shit out of it, right? And originally when we were doing Jack, nobody had any preconceptions, right? So it's kind of whatever goes. Now we've got 15 years of fan buildup, and people liking it, knowing the show, and oh crap, like, now I have to think about what I'm trying to say. Is this right for the character?
Right.
Should I call somebody and ask?
Yeah.
Should we do a fan poll? And then you try to go like, right, we created it, we made all these shows, we're gonna be honest to who we know Jack is and the story and the way it evolves, and let that kind of guide us.
And there's also an interesting angle that the audience that did watch it as kids had grown.
Yes.
So
Totally.
during that time period, so as Jack grew as a character, so did they. So it's kind of a fun parallel.
Right. Yeah, it's funny to compare the Samurai Jack fan base to, like, the Star Wars fan base. You definitely had probably less intense, probably a little more accepting than Star Wars fans can be. But it's like, yeah, you already had that run with the Star Wars fans having to try and cater to people with very strong wants and needs and expectations.
Yeah.
But with Samurai Jack, so you felt that kind of pressure. But were you confident that you could meet any demands that people had?
I just didn't think about it. I just knew we had to do the best storytelling that we could, and I'm always super hard on myself about trying to do the best possible work I could do at the time. I never want to look back and go, oh, I wish I worked harder, or I wish I did this or that. It's 100% of me is in everything that I do, and because you can't have regrets, right? You have one time around, and you kind of want to always look forward and not look back. And so we did everything that we kind of wanted to do.
Right. So you don't necessarily pay attention to the fan chatter.
I read it.
You read it.
It's fun. I mean, like, look, there's nothing better to sit in an audience and watch a movie or a TV show with 1,000 people. That's an incredible feeling, and it is great. At the same time, when you're just watching it at home on TV, it is what it is. Like, I'm not affected by it. Like, I love when people like it. When they don't like it, I'm interested by it. But I don't think it necessarily sways my sways me one way or another.
Right.
Unless, yeah.
So there's something satisfying for fans of Samurai Jack to have this 5th season because it completes the story. It's a return to the series they knew and loved, the character. What was personally satisfying for both of you to be able to return to the series so many years later?
I mean, just doing it, and then, because yeah, it's really it's true, the fan base, because I've been trying to make it a movie for, ever since we stopped. It's gone through like 5 different producers, 4 different studios. And the one problem was we love Jack because of A, B, and C, and D. Right. Then this is what they tell me, right? And then we get into the studio, we start working on it, they go, okay, you can't have A, B, C, and D. Right? But I'm like, but then that's all of what Jack is. And they don't understand that, and then you try to Hollywood, make it like a Hollywood film and just follow the formula, and that's never what Jack is, right? So it always stopped. And no matter how many scripts people wrote, I'm like, yeah, this is no good. And it stayed true. Like, nobody wanted to do it because it wasn't true. And so then finally decided, yeah, let's just do a TV show and let's just do it right and finish the story the way it should be. And so that was the satisfying part about it, is I guess just finishing it and having a final arc that we completed.
Yeah.
Totally.
And for me, it's like his journey wasn't complete. It's just like it was left hanging there in the air. So it's something that you want to see the story done. You want to see it finished.
And now in a game,
Yeah.
you can complete
Yeah.
the story the way you want to complete the story.
Yeah, let's talk about games.
Yeah.
Let's talk about games now. So what kinds of video games are you guys into? Are you video game players?
I play a lot of sports games and a lot of old games. Yeah.
Old games?
Yeah.
Like what?
I play Centipede all the time.
Hey man, it holds up. What about you?
I skipped the video game birth. I mean, I played, I went to arcades and played Dragon's Lair and Pac-Man and all that stuff that we grew up in the 80s. But then I remember I bought the first Call of Duty.
Yeah.
And I didn't, because I was, into World War II and it's, protecting Russia and all this stuff. And it was like a Stalingrad version of it, I think. And I didn't understand just running around and doing things. Like when you grow up your whole life on the let's say the Pac-Man philosophy, you gotta eat the dots and avoid the ghosts, and you're done. Right now, to explore, the exploring part of video games and committing that much time to it, I couldn't fathom, and it didn't fit where I was in my life and blah, blah, blah. And then, I had kids, and my son got into all those video games, Assassin's Creed and all that stuff. And I would watch him play, and I'm like, where are you going? And he's just running around, jumping buildings. And it never connected with me, so I'm off any video games. I think I play Wordplay on my phone, but that's about it.
That's fun.
And I
Yeah.
played Red Dead Redemption,
Okay.
and the new one, and I spent like maybe an hour stalking a deer. And then I realized, what am I doing? I gotta go to work.
I get it. Like I understand the coolness of it. It's just when you let's say if you're a vegetarian on your life,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you got to eat steak, and it tastes weird, and it doesn't just fit. And so I feel like I just missed it.
Right. But now we have Samurai Jack as a video game.
Yeah. There's
So-
more action. It's not as much discovery, but I think it fulfills. I'm not an expert, but I think it fulfills both of those worlds.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
So other than, being able to go back to this moment in season 5 and being able to actually play through and give people the opportunity to experience this segment of the series and story themselves, what was exciting to you when approached to make a game for Samurai Jack as non-gamers?
I mean, for me, it was, are we going to do it right? Are we going to have a full commitment? Not just, you don't want it to just be a cash grab, right? That's the worst thing about it. So if it's done and approached from the right point of view, and the folks at Adult Swim were always so supportive, and I think they wanted that too. They didn't want it just to be opportunistic, right? So I think for me, it was just, if it came from a sincere place, then it was time to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And also when we were on the series originally and the other game came about early on, everybody on the show loved games and play games, all day. I think Zelda nearly ruined the Powerpuff production
Yes.
at one point. when it was approached that there was going to be a game, everybody was doing designs. Paul Rudish he'd created all these things, and everybody had so many ideas, and then it was just kind of like left a little disappointing, because nothing, it wasn't what we all hoped
Right, for the original game.
Right, and then seeing this and knowing what it is, it's like it's the culmination of all of that. So
Right.
it's kind of like you actually get to play the game that we always wanted to play.
Right.
So
Yeah,
which
I
is
mean, it
pretty
seems
fantastic.
it seems really interesting and maybe even special to have other people who are really in love with the franchise, with your work, and take a stab at interpreting it.
Yeah.
Like, is that a weird experience, or is it flattering to have that?
Yeah, I think it's very flattering. It took me a while to let go. Like, I used to want to have my hand in every piece of marketing art and all of it because it's your baby. You want to watch every one of his steps. And then as the show became bigger than just me, then you start to accept it and you're like, oh, okay, this is kind of okay, and this is okay, and this is different than I would have done it, but it still feels right. As long as it feels right is what's important. And so this was a very natural extension of that.
Right.
Yeah. Especially like coming up with everything and bouncing it off Genndy and, like, all right, so we're going to do this and this. And we had parameters that we had to put it in, and being involved with it all the way through and making sure that it was all being done correctly is chief.
Yeah, and it was neat. Like I think we were doing. They were showing me some storyboards from the beginning or something, and there were some cool ideas. It was boards, and I was like, oh yeah, let's take this and let's even take it further, like what we would do in the show. And because what the show is you take one kind of cool idea and then you do it for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? And this was, well, here's 5 ideas for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So I go, let's take this one idea is really cool, and then extrapolate it into this time frame.
Right.
And so it was fun to do that again.
And what was it like to have other folks from the show, like Phil Lamar, who we got to see in this video, who is awesome, and it's scary to see him do the Jack voice when it's just his face and not like through Jack, but also like he is the best. So what was it like having people like him also work on the game?
It's traumatizing to see Phil do Jack.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is about Phil especially is he understands Jack. And when we would talk, I would never ask him to do a read specifically. We would talk about where he is in the story, and he would actually act his way. Like we talk about pacing a little faster, slower, whatever. But generally, he wants the story. He wants to understand where he's at. And then it's almost like Jack is alive in him, and then he can perform it.
Yeah, definitely. Even in the recording phase, we'll be going through the dialogue, and he'll be recording the line, and he'll be like, He actually was like, I think we shouldn't use that there. We should, I think we put a can't in there, and Jack doesn't do any contractions.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I cannot.
I cannot do
Oh God, it sounds like it'd be scary to not only see Phil Lamar do the voice, but also be acting like Jack in the studio.
He never breaks, too. He just walks around like, no,
He is
Jack.
He's very intense because we auditioned back in the day. I think almost like 100 actors to find Jack. And what ruins it for me sometimes is in auditions, if you see the person, you have already prejudged them. That they can or they cannot do the voice. And so somewhere in between, during my audition process, I started not looking at who's in the booth, and I would just react to the voice. And then all of a sudden, I heard this booming voice because I wanted like a Clint Eastwood type, soft-spoken but speaks very well. And I was like, yeah, that's really great. And then I look, and then it's Phil, and he's kind of unassuming and quiet. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's good. And he's very intense. Like after he left the audition, he spent like half an hour walking through Cartoon Network hallways looking at artwork.
Oh wow.
It was really
And a lot of the original, the crew, all the voice actors are back in this, so that's kind of amazing to see. Like John DiMaggio come back and do the Scotsman, and he's a pretty big character.
Yeah.
In the show and in real life.
Yeah.
He is the real life Scotsman. So,
Yeah.
Even actors, like one actor had retired, and so we had to patch him in from Maine, and it was it was pretty incredible to get everybody back in, but also be like, okay, who was I? And you're like, okay, this is who, remember?
Right.
And it's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I know which one that was.
And right, and Kevin, who plays Demongo,
Yeah.
thought that he never did it that high. He thought we would like automate it or something. I'm like, no, you went that high.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. No pitching up required. Yeah, I mean, it's so amazing. It seems like it must be such an amazing experience to have all of these people still so in love with and committed to this show that they worked on years ago, right? Like
Yeah, and
20 years ago almost.
they get it from a completely different angle that we do because they are loved for their voices, right? And they're each super good and professional, and they do a lot of different voices. And so I think they get bombarded in a much different way.
Yeah.
You know, and there's an attachment, almost more of a, you know, like I'm the creator, so I get a certain different aspect, and then they get almost more of like a acting.
Right.
You know, like people love their acting and their performances, and so it's a whole different point of view.
Yeah, like you're Jack's dad, but Phil Lamar is Jack.
I'm the papa.
Yeah. You are Phil Lamar's dad.
And Phil feels that way too.
Yeah, I mean, that's what seems so special about this project, but also season 5, is you guys were able to pick up Samurai Jack almost as if it hadn't been so many years since. And it doesn't even feel weird necessarily to have a Samurai Jack video game come out right now, even though season 5 aired 3 years ago. Samurai Jack continues to have this life.
Yeah, I don't think we squoze the life of it yet.
Right.
It's just the beginning of it all.
There's still more.
Oh, just the beginning? Do you have more to say about that?
No.
Movie when? Season 6 when? I want to open the floor to questions shortly, but I do want to ask, so just over the years and years and years that you've spent working on Samurai Jack, are there particular favorite memories, moments, or episodes that really stand out to you still as like, this is what I love the most about this show?
I mean, there's a couple of moments, and they're kind of like the aha, we have something type of scenarios where we got the first episode as a work print, so no sound, and that training sequence is like a 7-minute montage with no dialogue. And I was in the editing room, and Mike Lazo and Linda Szymanski, who were the executives back then, wanted to see it. And we sat through the first 10 minutes of it, and they go, wow, this is unlike anything we've ever seen. And we knew we had something. And we understood the story with no music, without anything. Mm-hmm. And then when we were doing the Blind Archers episode, like that's the one we're like, yeah, that's the show. You know, like everything connected, and it was an experience of that episode.
Right. What about you, Darrick?
There's so many, just because we were on it for so long, and just seeing the storyboard pitches themselves are so memorable. There are so many that they're so funny, and so many great people working on them. And so we would have these pitches, and the whole crew would come to them, and they'd just be super entertaining and really, really funny.
And what Darrick's talking about is for every storyboard, which is half an hour, maybe 500, 600 panels, maybe more, we would pin them all along the walls, and the artists would take us through and pitch the whole episode the way they kind of envision it. And then I would go through and put Post-its and fix things, and that was the process. And so when you're doing maybe a 5-minute fight sequence, it comes over here. And then half the people are sleeping because it's so long, but you know that when you're going to do it in real time, it's going to be incredible. Yeah, but they're all very memorable.
Especially like the Spartans episode, that was like a 700-page storyboard. And the storyboard artist, Brian Andrews and Brian Larson, they do a lot of poses, so there's a lot of animation in there. So there was just piles and piles of boards that had pages, pinned to them, and then it would just be like, okay, hold on, we got to bring in this one.
Bring the next board.
They were all outside the room. They had to just keep bringing them in, and it was amazing to watch.
Wow. That is 700 pages of anything makes me feel very tired. I cannot look at that many pages at once. Okay, so I think I want to open the floor up to questions, if that's cool with you guys. So there's actually a mic in the middle here where this lovely lady is raising her hands. So please be careful lining up. But yeah, I think
Half the people are leaving, and the other half want to ask questions.
some people are like, I hate Q&A, and then some people are like, I love Q&A. I came
Questions,
here
I'm
for
out.
Q&A.
Yeah.
I only came to this panel for Q&A. I just showed up. Okay. Cool. Well, let's start in a minute when the chatter kind of dies down a little
Sure,
bit.
they can talk over it.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes for questions. So,
Go ahead.
yeah, first up.
Hello, big fan. I've been working on my pitch for a cartoon for a while. I want to know what's the best way to pitch at studios.
So when you're pitching, think of it as you're selling a product, okay? And you have to try to figure out what is the simplest way, the clearest way, and the most entertaining way to communicate your product, right? So if I'm selling this bottled water, it's gonna quench your thirst, and it's clear, right? And you have to figure out a very simple way, because as creators, we love our minutia, you know? And like I know for Steven's Universe, Rebecca came to me when she was developing the show, and she had all these great ideas, right? And I go, these are all awesome, and this is awesome for you and for the show, but the one really bit of advice that I gave her, I go, just sell what the relationship is. You know, and I think that helped her clarify it going forward, you know, and helped her make it and stuff. And I think that's the thing, is that we're always our worst enemies because we have such a grand scale of everything. But just boil it down to its essence of what it is.
Thank you so much. Best answer I've ever gotten.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Hello. Sorry. I had a question about, with Primal and Samurai Jack, you know, Samurai Jack has like minimal dialogue and Primal has no dialogue. I was wondering, is there like a different way you like approach storyboards or scripting with that compared to like a more dialogue-heavy show?
Yeah, I mean, there is no scripts. So it's basically, like Darrick and I would write the episode, and we just go what happens in every sequence in a general sense, and where the emotions are, and where the character things are. And then when I get down to boarding, then I'll kind of break down what I'm trying to say, and then usually I could visualize it before I start drawing. So I kind of picture the energy, and that's really what I'm trying to do, especially for Primal, is what's the energy I'm trying to communicate? Sad, happy, excited, and then I get into it, and it's basically trying to almost do it in real time. So I'll do whatever, 20 panels, and then I'll pitch back to myself. Because you're trying to sell a rhythm, and it's like making music, really, but through drawings. And that's the best way I can really communicate how I work, is I go as fast as I can in the beginning, and then I'll go back and draw things a little better. But generally, I'm trying to create an energy.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I'm short.
Oh.
All right. So my question is, how has Samurai Jack affected your life in a personal way, like with fans, just real life?
I mean, it's kind of, I try not to think about my big picture in a way, right? And because I still feel like my career is just starting, even though this is my fourth decade. I've been working in 4 decades. I try not to think about the effect of it, all that kind of big stuff. It's too big to think about. But then sometimes you get a person coming up to you and sharing a story that's really emotional to them. Like when I was in New York, some girl came up to me and she said, yeah, I used to travel. I was like an army kid, and I would grow up on bases, and she grew up in Africa. And then when she came to France as a little kid, she started to watch Dexter. And she learned how to speak English kind of from that show, and it was her first cartoon show she ever watched. And which is it's like a huge deal. It's like a Bugs Bunny to me or something, And those kind of emotional stories, a lot of stories about parents and kids watching it together. That's the stuff that makes you feel really good and affects you. But when I start to do my work, I can't think about it, because then it becomes too big, and then I can't focus. Because when doing animation, you're here, and then the rest of the world is there. And so if I let this world invade my little space, it's not going to be honest. Then I'm like, well, this worked, so I'm going to try to please that person over here. So that's the way I kind of approach it.
You taught me how to say cheese in French.
Yes, cheese omelet. Yeah.
Hi. So going from Cartoon Network originally, finishing off with stuff like Symbionic Titan, and then transitioning to Sony, doing that awesome test for Popeye, which was some of the most incredible translation of 2D into a 3D style I've ever seen. Coming back to something like Samurai Jack that you yourself created, is there this catharsis as a creator or this sort of nostalgia you have for your earlier work? How does that really function for you? And do you ever think about where you could go with some of your other earlier projects like Dexter or Titan, which didn't really, ever have an ending, really,
Yeah, I think, I have a fondness for drawings, obviously, so I think that's where I always tend to go first is what can I do in 2D with drawings that hasn't been done? Where can I push myself with drawings that I haven't done before? And again, I'll talk a lot about feel and energy because I feel like when you're watching most animated shows, you just watch and there's some funny dialogue here and there and then you're done. Right? What I try to sell is a feeling.
You're more of
that felt cool, that felt weird.
Like a storyboard attitude.
Yeah.
You feel the flow of the action.
Yeah, there's like listening to music or something. So when you watch Primal, you get a feeling. Yeah. Sometimes bad, sometimes good.
Yeah.
And so that's what's really fun to me, and that's more complicated and difficult to do. And so I feel like that's where I'm heading. And I don't care as you start to realize, like in the beginning of Dexter, it was about the cool style and snappy animation, and because that's all we were trying to do is something kind of snappy and very iconic and very graphic. And same thing through Powerpuff and through Jack, of course. And then you start to realize, style isn't as important anymore. It's the substance of what you're trying to do. And I started to shift, even in the adult version of Jack, we started to shift into feeling because we could now get really deep into the psyche and do PTSD and do consideration of suicide and all these heavy themes, but still in our own language, And I think that's what became really exciting, and I feel like I'm tangenting off your initial question.
Oh, no, that's fine, yeah.
But that's the kind of where we're at with it.
Yeah, you and Craig are some of the most influential people to me, especially growing up and watching your creation. So I just want to thank you, and keep it up.
Thank you.
40 years.
I think we have time for one more question, if
quick
that's
question.
okay.
Originally, all of the Jack series was in a flat 2D, like Dexter and Powerpuff Girls. Why did we move to such a 3D cartoon? Is it just modern day? Is it just something new we're trying, or are we just...
For what?
For the actual animation?
Oh, for the video game?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think doing a 2D drawn game, I felt that the video game audience maybe doesn't like that as much because you're much more limited, right? And then I've always wanted the translation to be good and to facilitate not just what I want, right, but to facilitate what more people would want, and the playability has to match that. And I feel like 2D is really hard. You couldn't do this. It wouldn't look good.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think this is the kind of the best of both worlds.
Perfect. Yeah. It's just a lot going on. Thank you very much.
As you play as Jack, you are Jack in the game. You are playing him. So giving it a 3D space and being able to move around that space gives it a sense of where you are actually living in that world.
Perfect. So. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Genndy and Darrick, this was awesome. I hope everyone appreciated just geeking out about Samurai Jack for an hour. And thank you guys so much. The game is out in the summer.
Thank you.
And Samurai Jack is available to watch wherever you watch anything. Thank you guys.